identity issues and people identifying with me. One of the things at the Greens in Queen's Park, and I think most of you know Brighton well enough to know Queen's Park, where we had 3 Green councillors. One of the councillors has described it on a Facebook page as they suffered from the Nancy Platts bounce, which I'm actually quite proud of. Yeah, it's some sort of new dance or something. But, I think we did actually pull over quite a lot of votes on a personal level in Queen's Park. But what it also showed us is, as good as your local ground campaign is, you need that national swing. We need that national swing here in Brighton to make a difference. And I think the difference between us and Hove was that Hove lost their incumbent and ours was still there. And it's quite hard to battle that personal level of vote when people can point to things. And the hospital was a classic, whether we know the stories behind the hospital, but that was an absolute classic that he was able to hold something up in a way that we couldn't. But I think, the things that worked, we ran a campaign to keep a GP surgery, that built on things. We had 35 to 40 disabled people in a room talking about their disabilities and their access to jobs, employment, services and so on. And I think those community campaigns did win us a lot of support as well. And I think overall, I believe anyway, that our campaign was inclusive and welcoming, that we did actually get everybody who wanted to get involved was able to get involved. In terms of where we go next, I've got a real fear that we're now rushing into a leadership election. I don't think we should be doing this yet. I think we should be talking about the future of the party and then finding the kind of leader that will take us there. And I've got a real worry that we are electing a leader first who will then have their ideas embedded as the template for the way forward, and possibly in a way that the rest of us can't follow. And I've got a real fear about that, and I've got a real fear that all the work we've done at a local level could be lost if we don't get the right leader. Whoever does it has got to set out a policy vision for 2020. But having had such a defeat, how do we know what that looks like until such time as we've had a chance to do some kind of analysis and discussion? And the bit I've briefly read out was several hours of some of us sitting around talking about what worked and what didn't and what to include, but there's so much more that we can talk about. And actually, unless we talk to the voters about why they weren't voting Labour, our ideas amongst ourselves, we can come to one set of conclusions, but unless we talk to people out there, we're not going to necessarily get to the same place. And we've got to reconnect with that grassroots. If we don't, they're still not going to vote for us. And I've also got concerns about the lineup as it is at the moment. I haven't heard anyone yet that's reflecting my view, I have to be honest. I'm not seeing anybody at the moment that I'm going to follow, and that's a huge concern to me. I think secondly, we've got to look at our links with the trade unions. I think we should robustly defend those links with the trade unions. And I think we've got to stop being so scared of saying so as well. No one ever looks at the Tory hedge funders. Why aren't we looking at who's funding the Tory party and who's behind that? Everyone's very, very quiet about that. The focus is never on them. To put this together, we looked at lots of articles, and one of them was from John Trickett, who offered some interesting insights into future direction, and one of them was about rebuilding the Labour movement's links into local communities, and I mentioned about the disabled communities that we met. What was interesting about getting that group of people into a room was they didn't fit into the hard-working families category. On the whole, they don't like the Tories because they don't believe the Tories stand up for them, and they are looking to Labour to be the party that represent them. We expected at that meeting, I think we were expecting about less than 10 people to turn up. When 35 to 40 people came, we had to keep rearranging the room to fit everybody in. We had people there who were deaf, who were blind. We had one guy who spoke through eye recognition software. We had people who felt quite isolated. And probably the most heart-rending comment I heard was afterwards. Someone said to me that was the first time they'd ever felt listened to. Now that's something that we should do, and it's something that if I do get elected as chair, I want to do every year, and I want to grow it. It's have a proper conference for disabled people right across Brighton and Hove, because we are the parties that should represent them. It shouldn't just be about hard-working people, it should be about other members of our society who can't get a job or who can't work hard, but are still valued members of our community and that we should be looking after. And finally, this is one of the things I'm quite interested in people's views in. I think it's time that we built a progressive alliance, and I know that's going to be hard for some people to hear than others. I think we've got to stop saying that if only a couple of thousand people had voted Labour instead of Green, we would have won this seat. Yes, that's how the arithmetic stacks up. The reality is, it is down to us to paint a positive vision that people want to vote for. It shouldn't have been a question of a few votes to get over the line. We should have thumping majorities in seats like Brighton, Kent Town. And we've got to accept our own faults and our own responsibilities about why that didn't happen. And we've got to work with other campaign groups, other organisations, and dare I say it, possibly even other political parties, and work out how we can work together to make that happen. And we've got to spend the next 5 years highlighting the failings of the Tory party policies and raising the voices of those people that are being left behind, such as the sick, the disabled, the homeless people sleeping on our streets, our parks and on our beaches. And we don't want the next 5 years just to be defined by Tory cuts and austerity, but by solidarity and community activism. We should be reaching out in a spirit of collectivism and challenging the years and years of Thatcherism that are still going on under Cameron and Osborne, where everybody just thinks about what difference it makes to themselves and not into the wider society. So, you know, I've had to think long and hard. Admittedly, I didn't think for very long after the election to say I want to stand for chair of the local party, because I want to build on what we've achieved together. I do want to take that forward. I want to use that role to extend the role of the Labour Party within the community and to make it more active with local campaigns and contribute to the cause really of not just Labour as a political party, but as a Labour movement once again. Thank you.